Hey
right.
team, welcome back to Trauma Agility. I am your host, Haley the therapist, and today we have David Richman on the line. Hi, David.
Hello, Haley. How are you?
Good. You are an author, an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and an athlete, and I would say world class from some of the things that you have done. And you have done some pretty significant work surrounding trauma. In interviewing individuals. In your new book called Cycle of Lives, you've interviewed 15 different individuals, right, with their stories on how cancer and how things have affected their processing and their emotions behind it. And I think that's so unbelievably important and incredible.
Oh, thanks. Well, I think just now, like it just seems in the last few years that the stigma around like dealing with trauma and the emotional issues behind trauma, dealing with mental illness, PTSD, the emotional side of things is so, it's just kind of burgeoning. It's like brand new, like that it's okay to talk about these things and deal with these things. And I embarked on this project probably maybe a year or two even ahead of time, because it's only in the last couple of years that it's happened. I mean, when I set out to do this, I looked at, how many podcasts were dealing with emotions and trauma and, transformation from grief and all this stuff. There weren't that many. Now there's tons and tons and tons, and not because there's a supply, but just because the demand is so great, so
Right.
I'm glad to know that you're doing what you're doing. And my book hopefully is giving people some tools to deal with that emotional side of the trauma.
Oh, amazing. So tell me a little bit about the background of your book. And I was reading, and we were kind of talking before we hit record on that your sister passed away from brain cancer. So tell me how it developed into 15 different stories.
Yeah, so she actually passed away in 2007. So it was a it was a while ago. And boy, I don't know how to unpack this really quick, but I'm gonna try. So at that time, I was just starting to get my life in order. I had very young kids, my 4-year-old twins. We need to get out of a bad situation at home, so I got them out of it. I had stresses at work, some of them self-created, stresses in life, whatever. I was overweight, I was a smoker, I was just like not unhappy, but kind of underlying miserable. And I just said, man, I got to start to change my life around. And then I got the call from my sister saying she's got brain cancer and it's probably terminal. And I'm just like, oh man, here's this girl that had the same, whacked up childhood that I had, and got out of that. Wonderful marriage, 2 young kids, and living her best life, and she's not going to be around much longer. And I just said, man, I got to change this. So I started doing athletics. Then I started doing endurance athletics. And as I'm getting to the point where I feel comfortable doing this endurance athletics, June's getting to the point where she's almost ready to die. And we made this pact with each other that she was going to be on the infield at this high school track to watch a 24-hour relay for life go on that had a big team, that was there for her. She died 2 days before, but so she didn't get to see it. But I made a pact with her that I'd be out there running for the whole 24 hours. So I kept my end of the bargain obviously out of respect for her. And I noticed, Haley, that people just were not capable of talking about the emotional side of their journeys. Like they could talk about treatment and, how to get people to watch your kids, and, what's the best hospital to go to, and how do I reduce my stress, and those kind of things they could deal with. But when it came to like the emotional side of things, even people that were close family members, they just kind of isolated and just kind of went into their own little heads and weren't really equipped to talk about it. And so
absolutely, especially when you have like one of those diagnoses that that is probably not going to be curable. when it is terminal. How much time did your sister have from her diagnosis to the time that she passed away?
So she was fortunate in one sense that her cancer was so rare that they made a board study out of her at the cancer center at UCLA that took care of her. So she lasted for about 4 years, couple surgeries, a lot of chemo, a lot of radiation, a lot of bad stuff happened to her along the way. But she did actually, I mean, it's hard to say, but without sounding ridiculous, but it is kind of fortunate sometimes with cancer in that you can have a window of time. You can process these things, and even though it's such a dark, miserable, sad place to be, sometimes it also can be optimistic, and like when the end is coming, you can kind of clean things off your list that you need to.
Yeah.
And so she lasted for 4 years. I think that gave her some really quality time with her husband and kids and friends and family and stuff. And although there was no happy ending, I think at least during those 4 years, she got a lot of reflection, self-reflection, a lot of attention. And I look at it as you can't compare one person's tragedy to the next, but at least she had that time, and
Right.
so that was good.
I see that a lot in my in the patients that I have with cancer. They tend to compare of, oh, I only have a few months, or I only have, the prognosis is not good. And, oh, I might have years, but this person doesn't. And then there's that survivor's guilt that comes in, or there's that extreme sense of doom of, my time is so limited. What am I going to do with it? And you're just trying to scramble and through those emotions, and they're intense, and it is a trauma, and it impacts your body and impacts everything that you do. And I love that your book kind of describes all this and kind of unpacks those emotions and what they look like, because people don't talk about it.
They just don't. And it's kind of so what I wanted to do, and you can totally relate to this, I know people that follow you and watch you can totally relate to this, is that I didn't know, like I had dealt with a lot of people that had cancer, but I don't know what it's like to have cancer, right? And a lot of people luckily won't, but a lot do. And we're like, I don't know what to say to them. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. I don't know when to get in the way, when to get out of the way, all of this stuff, right? Excuse me. What I do know is I can identify with other traumas they've had in their lives. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to find really evocative, interesting, inspiring, even if the stories were somewhat tragic, but inspirational, hopeful stories. But I wanted to frame their emotional journey with cancer as either a patient, caregiver, loved one, a doctor, whatever. I wanted to frame that around the traumas that they had in their lives previous to encountering cancer that I could identify with. So that way I might better understand what they've gone through or what they are going through. And that would give me a basis to reflect. So in other words, if somebody said to me, hey, listen, Haley, I appreciate the offer, but I'm really fine. I don't need your help. I'm really good. Well, really, is that what's going on? Or is it that maybe there's a backstory to very traumatic events of abandonment, or very traumatic events of wanting to lean on people and having them turn away, or maybe feeling guilty for asking for help or whatever. And so even though they want to have a connection with you and they want to ask you for help and they want to accept your help, they are not going to because of other things. And that's what I wanted to do. Was
just did an episode on this for the fear, the basic fears that we have is fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of shame, fear of guilt. And a lot of that is a narrative that we have formulated from our past, whether it be an experience that we had or someone told us indirectly or directly, and we took that and ran with it. So it's changing the narrative of, oh, I don't need your help, to, oh, yeah, I do need help, but I'm scared to ask for it.
Yeah. And that whole basket of things you just mentioned, right, they're so real, because we are just really like little kids, right? We're just grown
Yeah.
up, and what all little kids want is to be safe and to be heard, and to matter. And you can't be safe and be heard and matter if you're not understood. We come to learn that. And so we don't often take the time to understand each other. And you were saying earlier that your mom's a breast cancer survivor, you had an aunt die of cancer, and when you are going through something that you hear the word, this is potentially precancerous, it hits you at a way deeper level that nobody might know if they don't know your background than somebody who doesn't have a mom that's a breast cancer survivor, an aunt who passed away, other people that they know that have dealt with this. It might not hit them at the same level. And so you are allowed to feel whatever the way you should feel about it and the way you respond to it. But we don't often know unless we get deeper into what's going on in your past. And again, strangers aren't going to do this, but the people that are connected to you and the people that are close to you or the people that want to help you, they need to know more about these things so that they can understand how to better interact with you. And,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
if from an outsider's point of view, you might be overreacting. From an insider's point of view, you might be underreacting. It's right. It's just,
I call it funeral speak because not a lot of people know what to say, especially at funerals. And it's, I'm so sorry for you, which is sympathy, right? And then there's the, oh, like, I don't understand what you're going through, but I'm here for you if you need me. And that's kind of like a healthy empathy.
yeah,
And here's the truth of it is that we really don't know how to feel about it. I remember the first time that I heard the word dysplastic nevus, and I was like, what is that? What is this on my body? And they were like, oh, it's precancerous. And because it was precancerous, my mind automatically went to, oh, it's going to be like my aunt, it's going to be like my mom, I'm going to die. And it's that fear of what's going to happen to my kids, what's going to happen to me, how much time do I have? This is precancerous, so it means it's not cancerous. What does this mean? What is it? And there's um, so much involved in that too, of like, especially with nevuses, with moles, that, oh, well, the cells are changing, but they could not change. And then so a lot of the things are up in the air and you don't have a whole lot of answers for it. And I think walking my patients through cancer, different types of cancer, I feel like it's always the same on where it's like at the very beginning, you don't have a whole lot of answers. So your brain really loves to figure out what are the possibilities, and our possibilities always go to like the worst case
of
scenarios.
course. Yeah, of course they do, because we want to survive, right? That's an instinct of wanting to survive. And if you're trying to survive against something, it's usually like figuring out like how am I going to conquer something? How am I going to pass it? What's going to take me down? And those things are very real. And I think, Haley, the reason that I felt like the book could make an impact on people is I do feel like we all kind of have the same basic emotions.
Mhm.
Um, you put yourself inside of a cave and a bear walks in, nobody's going to not be scared, right? Right. I
Unless you're
mean,
bigger than the bear.
right. Well, yeah, right. Put, right. Put yourself on a boat, and you fall in the water, and you can't find the surface. Of course, you're going to be scared, right? I mean, we all have the same basic emotions, and we don't have the same emotional responses to things, all things, but we do have the same basic emotions. And so, if we can understand like people's trauma, right? And I think the only way we can do that is through storytelling, right? Like you can't tell me what's going on and have me understand it. But when you tell me a story and I'm starting to feel for you as a person and I'm starting to connect with you at a different level, then I can really understand it. And once we have that kind of safe connecting space, then I can understand your story. And you combine that with the emotions that we all have in common. And that's what makes great movies and great books so great, right? Is because we identify with the character, right? We would just feel for the person because we're like, oh, I know them. And then I understand their emotional arc. And it's like, oh man, right? That's the way we're impacted. And that's the way I try to write these stories is I took myself out of the story. They're kind of first person those people's experience and perspective, so that we could, as the reader, identify with them and really understand what emotional journey they're on or were on. And then we can identify with them. And I feel like we could take that to our personal lives and use it to form more meaningful connections with the people that we're close to. I feel like that's what we all want to do.
Absolutely. And so you met these people and they're all over, right?
All over the place. So what I did, Haley, was I cold called hospitals, cancer centers. I asked friends who they knew had an interesting story. I asked friends of friends. I asked coworkers. I just tried to figure out, I needed to find these like really unique, different, really touching, moving stories, but you can't always just, walk into those accidentally. So I had to call around and really ask, people, who do you know and who should I be talking to? And it led me down a lot of roads. I was able to talk to a lot of people. Now, not everybody was willing to go there with me. I wasn't able to bond with some people as well, right? Because sometimes, I'm sure you know this as an interviewer, when you're interviewing people, sometimes there's a connection, and sometimes it's really hard to pull the real good stuff out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I found that, and it's understandable when you're talking about something traumatic, especially cancer, that you might not always get to the heart of the matter. But I was able to talk to people, and the people that made the book, I was able to talk to them for, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, 2.5 years before I met them. Most of them, some of them I knew, very few, but I had met them along the way. But most of the people I hadn't. And I thought, geez, you know what? If we're all connected by emotion and we're all connected by story, why don't I connect the stories, like the little line that you draw across the country? Why don't I connect those stories by riding my bike to go see them all? So there was as many as I could. So
That's
the
incredible.
stories, yeah, it was pretty awesome. That the 15 stories are there, and then in between is a little narrative of the bike ride, a little bit of intro and outro to each story, and then interestingly enough, some of the wonderful, amazing things that I saw along the way. So I included that in the narrative. So I guess there's 16 stories, 15 people's stories, and then mine.
So you cycled, and that's the endurance athletics that you were talking about. You used your plan of like, I'm going to get myself better. And then you
Right.
use that in order to do something really great with it. And I got to mention some of these, like you've done over 50 triathlons, right? Including 15 Ironman-distance triathlons, more than 50 runs, longer than marathon distance. You've had several 24-hour runs. You've had an 85-mile run in Mexico during the summer.
Right.
I think you're a little nuts, but in a good way. And then 4 consecutive marathons from there. And then you also did a solo, like 5,000-mile bike ride from California to Florida to New York. And so you rode your bike to see these people, to meet these people face to face, and to share in their stories. And oh my goodness, wow. That's incredible.
Well, thanks. You were talking earlier about the fact, like, it's kind of amazing what the human body can do. And, here's a guy who, I pretty much my adult life hadn't done anything athletic. Maybe, I was like, play a volleyball on the weekend or go wakeboarding or something like that. But I mean, doing something athletic, going for a 5K run or running a half marathon or doing that would have been never in my realm of possibilities. And then I just said, you know what, I got to figure out who I am and what I'm made of, and what you can do. It's just shocking. Like, I'm not suggesting that everybody should want to do these things, but what's simply amazing is that if you wanted to, like, the limits of what you could do are nowhere near where you think they are. I mean, they're nowhere near. I just finished, actually, you said 15. I just finished my 18th Ironman this past Sunday. And I mean, it's like, really? I mean, at my age, I'm doing Ironmans. It's kind of stupid, but but at the other end, I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I want to see what I could do, right? And to do a, nearly 5,000-mile bike ride, and I did it the hard way, like I did it hard. Like I woke up every morning, jumped on my bike for 12, 14, 16 hours, jumped off my bike. I mean, I was stomping my clothes in the shower before I passed out at night to get up and do it again. I mean, I did the hard way. It was brutal, but I was able to do it. Right. And so I'm not suggesting everybody wants to do these things, but if you want to discover more about yourself, and also it will bleed into other areas of your life. I mean, starting to do endurance athletics or immersing yourself into meditation or yoga or whatever, like to a next level, it's just shocking what you can do.
I gotta
And
ask you, I gotta
yeah.
ask you. So, and we're gonna come back to you biking to see these individuals that you wrote their stories in their book, and that's incredible as well that you were able to do that. But what helps you stay motivated in these types of endurance, adventures? I'm gonna call them adventures because isn't it an adventure? What helps you with your determination and your motivation and your drive to do it?
Well, it's a good question. And it sounds kind of preachy, but I'm gonna try to have it not be preachy. But look, I feel like sometimes we live on purpose and we don't live on purpose. And I didn't live on purpose for a long time. And so if you're living on purpose, that means you have a goal, right? And that is whatever, to get the most out of each day, to have better relationships, to do more work, to whatever your goal is. That's doing it on purpose. And I feel like if you have a goal, right, then you're working towards something. And when you work towards something, you're going forward, you're figuring stuff out, you're learning something new. And then if you reach the goal, then you're just like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Now what? Now what? Now what? And so I feel like while I can, which will probably hopefully be a very long time, while I can, I'm always going to see what more is out there, what's new to accomplish, what more can I learn about myself. And so I feel like if I stop doing that, then I've just proven to myself and to the world that I already know everything. And I definitely know everything about myself if I stop. And so I don't want to know everything about myself. And I don't think I know everything about the world. I'm still trying to figure it all out. And so I got to have new goals. I got to keep pushing. So I don't always think that all day, every day, but I feel like if you're not setting new goals, if you're not pressing yourself to higher and higher levels, then you're kind of giving up. And I'm not ready to give up. I'm not ready to already know everything. I mean, when I sit down with somebody, Haley, and I'm hearing about their best days behind them, I'm just like, we have nothing in common. Like we have nothing in common because my best days, I don't even know about them yet. And so I frame that around goals and athletic goals as well, because it's kind of neat to go out there and find something new out about yourself every day. I kind of like that.
I love that. I love that what you said. And you're right, because I feel like we tend to stop living because we get complacent, and we don't make goals because we get comfortable. And so there's a saying that I love, and it's be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because
Yeah.
that's how you learn, because we grow through pain. So you're biking to these individuals to talk to them about these stories. And what did you learn from that experience?
Whew. I learned a ton of things. We could do a whole episode on the things I learned on the bike ride for sure. I mean, I learned that that sometimes you need to accept help, and that's a good thing, right? Which I never did know that. And I really it took me a couple of years after the bike ride to really be okay with it, like be okay with asking for help and accepting people's offers of help. Because I used to think if I accept help, if I don't do it myself, that makes me weak, right? If I don't take charge, if I'm not 100% in control, then I'm not capable or whatever, right?
That's a
And
stigma of America. Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So I learned that that accepting people's help is actually doing something for them. It's not them doing it for you, because I want to help people. So why don't I let other people help me? It's totally stupid. So I learned that. I also learned that people are unbelievably generous. I had people, I went to this one restaurant at the end of the day in Louisiana, and to tell a long story in a short way, these three waitresses at the end of the night, it was a tiny little family restaurant, had heard about what I was doing, and they handed me an envelope with their night's tips, all their tips in it to give to the charities. The books, none of the proceeds from the book are going to me, they're all going to charity. And it gave me like $60 or whatever it was. It was not that much money, but it was their entire tips for the night. And they didn't know me from anybody. And they had heard what I was doing. And they're like, hey, we've all been touched by cancer, and we heard about your bike ride, and here, we want to give you tonight's tips. And I'm just like, what the heck?
Oh
People are
my
just
gosh,
so,
insert tears here.
I know, right? Oh my
Ah,
God. People are so nice. And we don't, I often didn't give people a chance to be nice. I come to it like being like thinking I know how people are gonna be. And so it really humbled me to understand that you don't know what people are going through, and you don't know what's going on in their heads. You don't know what's happening in their day. I remember one night actually in Texas, I was at a hotel, and my wife, my fiance at the time, went down to go grab something to eat. And she came back like an hour later. And I'm like, dude, like I'm starving. Like, what the hell, man? And she goes, I was talking to this lady downstairs. We were just chit-chatting while we were waiting for food. And she was just told by a coworker that the coworker's 4-year-old son was diagnosed with brain cancer. And she didn't know what to say to her friend. And we were just talking about how miserable that is and how difficult it is. And what do you say? And what don't you say? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh my God. And the lady was like, I can't wait till your husband's book come out so I can learn what to say to people. And I'm just like, oh my goodness.
what do
It's so
you say?
amazing.
What do you say to people? To what advice do you give?
Look, I don't know the answer to that. I think that the thing is what you do, right? Is just ask meaningful questions, be present, be real, find out how you can help. Um, you know, like I would say, like I know before I would do that. Oh, like, oh, I'm sorry. And oh, geez, I got to exit from the conversation because I don't know what the hell to say. Right.
Mhm.
But now I know that it's okay to say the wrong thing. Just don't purposely say something stupid. Like,
Yeah.
oh, really? I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, my neighbor's dog had a splinter in its paw yesterday. I know how you feel. I don't know what to say. It's like, no, don't say something stupid.
Oh,
Right?
don't say, never
Do you know what I'm
say,
saying?
I
Like,
know how
we,
you feel, or
we all know that cringy, I know how you feel thing, right?
Mhm,
But I
mhm.
think that what to say is more what to ask, like open-ended, heart-centered, real questions that you're listening for the answer, and you want to form that deeper connection. Now, maybe we're not able to do it, maybe they're not able to do it, but I think that's the place to start.
Yeah. And two things always: eye contact and just sharing space. And if you don't know, say, I really don't know. I'm here for you. If whatever you need me, I will support you. And if you just need to vent or just need someone to talk to, I'm willing to listen. Because you're right, we are little kids that just want to be heard. And
Yeah.
when we don't know how we feel or what's hurting, and we're a toddler and we're just crying because something hurts, but we don't know. And we're just like, I don't know. Or, we might know that they're tired, but they don't want to take a nap. They're like, I'm not tired. Okay. But just stay there with them. Let them know that they're loved, that they're heard, that they're appreciated, and they're seen, and they're not alone in their pain.
Yeah, and what you just said is really interesting but without going one step deeper, we just don't know the answer to the question, right? And if we can give them space and if we can listen, I was talking to somebody recently, it was actually another podcaster, and he was telling me a kind of a tragic story. And he's just like, dude, I have so much regret. I had this one friend, very close friend that passed away recently from cancer. And man, every time that he came over, I like tried to talk about stuff with him, and he just wouldn't open up. And he goes, all right, so we just watched football and we just whatever, and just ordered food, and we didn't like really talk about anything. But every time I tried to go somewhere, he wouldn't let me go there. And he goes, and I just regret that I wasn't able to form that the next level connection. And I said to him, I go, I got something to pose to you. And he goes, what? And I go, what if every single person that he spent time with was just dogging him, like just after him about his emotions and where he's at and what's he doing, and is he prepared to die, and is he hopeful to live, and he's dealing with these heavy things, and you're the one person he could hang out with that he didn't feel he had to talk about it. And he was like, oh shit, you're right. And I said, so maybe next time, if you do come to that position, instead of like doing this like awkward dance of not wanting to say the wrong thing or whatever, why don't you say to the person, listen, are we not talking about this heavy stuff because you don't want to talk about it? Or are we not talking about this heavy stuff because it's really good for you that we don't talk about it? Because this is the only, like, help me out, because I'm feeling like I'm doing something wrong here, and I'm going to regret not asking you this question. And he goes, oh man, that makes a lot of sense, but it's so hard. It's so hard to do that, man.
I love that. I love that so much. So when you were talking to these individuals who are in your book, what was some of the common themes between them, even though their stories were different?
Well, a common theme is what we were talking about before. It's a little bit of isolation or feeling abandoned, right? That was a common theme. Another common theme was that they didn't want people's sympathy, right? Don't tell me sorry. It's not your fault. That doesn't help me, and it shouldn't help you, because that doesn't forgive you. It's not your thing to forgive, right? Don't say you're sorry. You can be sorry that it's happening to them. You can feel bad that it's happening to them, but don't go, oh, I'm so sorry. No, it's not you to be sorry about. It's not your fault, right?
Right.
I feel like get rid of that, get rid of the sympathy. And as you said earlier, kind of lean into the empathy part of it, and which means understanding, right? Try to understand what they're going through. But all the stories were really, really different. I think one common theme was that everybody thought their story wasn't interesting. And we're talking about really, really interesting stories. And what's shocking about that to me, Haley, is that when we're going through things, when you were going through whatever you were going through in Iraq, or with kids, or with your parents or whatever, right? You're just living your life. Like it's not anything spectacular, because you're just figuring out how to get from minute to minute. It's not anything spectacular. But somebody else, if they sat back and looked at the highs and lows of your life till now, they might go like, what the hell? Like, what you've been through, what? And you're just like, it's no big deal, because you're just living your life. But we can learn a lot if we're able to get to the most impactful things, and how you did or didn't deal with them, and how we might learn from that. We can get that from anybody, right? Mm-hmm. And certainly for people that have been through dramatic and traumatic situations, if we can just take the time to get to connect and understand their stories. So that was one of the coolest things, is I would talk to people who are just ridiculously fascinating, and they'd be like, yeah, okay, we can talk, but nobody's gonna want to know my story. It's not that interesting. And I'm just like, what the hell? It's super interesting.
We minimize because of shame
Yeah.
and guilt, and I'm hurting, so no one's going to care, because of that feeling of isolation and that fear of abandonment. So it's almost like a self-fulfilled prophecy of, I'm going to push everybody away, but I'm fearful of being abandoned and rejected. There's
a couple of stories that are very much like that. And he talked really early on about survivor's guilt. There's one story, Terry, and her story is kind of amazing. Like she leaves at 18 to go across the country to college, because her parents could care less. And so she leaves and she goes, and she's kind of a little bit of a loner, but she finally finds a relationship, and right before they're going to get married, she gets a very, very bad diagnosis, and the guy abandons her and says, look, you're on your own, man. I can't handle this. By the way, I got somebody else pregnant. I'm going to stay here with her. So good luck going to the hospital. So she
No.
literally had to take herself to the hospital for her first treatment. So she ends up getting a bone marrow transplant, surviving that, which is very rare. Well, not very rare, but it's pretty rare. She goes into a support group of people that have the same cancer. It's a smaller support group. She's the only one that survives. All of the rest of them die. So she's got all of this guilt. Her cancer comes back. She goes for another bone marrow transplant. This is now 10 years from the first one. Guess what happens to her? The person that's supposed to take care of her says, I'm not strong like you. I can't be there for you. You're on your own. So she's abandoned again.
Double
And it's like,
trauma.
how hard is it going to be for this woman to ever reach out to anybody, to ever lean on anybody, to ever believe? Like, she just is like, why am I alive? You know, nobody's here for me. I can't ask anybody for help. They're going to end up leaving me. Why am I the one to survive? And her story is fascinating because when I asked her that question, like, why are you here? Like, what does it all mean? Like, how do you do it? She's just like, hey, I got a 50-50 chance of everything. And it's either a yes or a no. So I'm either going to wake up and it's going to be a good day or a bad day. There's nothing else. And I'm optimistic that I get to flip the coin every day. And I'm like, wow, man, that's kind of cool. Like,
It's
so
amazing.
fast forward, she's now
Really?
married. Yeah, she's now married. She's had, she started a new job. Her and her husband live in a new city. And she's like looking at every day as like, hey, it's going to be a good day today. But so you never know, right? But along the way, just understanding that, man, you might be the last person that could abandon that person. So don't do it, right? Just be there. Even if it's uncomfortable, just be there.
Here's one thing that all of our brains have in common. And it's we tend to focus on statistics as facts if it happens to us more than one time, even though it happened twice out of the many possibilities that it could have, billions of times. We take those two and we're like, nope, it's fact. So that's how it is forever. And that's how our brain registers it. Of if you ever look at the things that I'm not good enough on, right? I'm not good enough here, 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 and here. What's the evidence to support it? Oh, this happened to me one time, or this happened to me twice, or this happened to me. So it happened to me 3 times. So therefore it must be true. But I'm like, 3 times out of how many probability in your life?
Right. Right.
I
Right.
mean, the statistics are astronomical on the other end, but we don't focus in on that. We focus in on things that we hyper focus in on something that is bad. And there's the opposite of that, of sometimes we hyper focus on the things that are good about us. And I love me. And then we go the opposite direction. So life is all just about a healthy balance of what is true and what is our narrative. And is our narrative, does it work for us? Does it feel true? Does it ring true? Does it speak to our entire body as true, or is something off about it?
Yeah, that's really well said. And I'll tell you, it's really funny because she, during all of her cancer journeys, this particular person, Terry, she was always told, oh, you have a 15% chance of this, and you have an 80% chance of that, you have a 5% chance of that. And it just finally hit her one day. She was out with some coworkers at a bar, and somebody had brought somebody to set her up with. And she started doing the math, like, what are the chances that, and then she just said, screw it. You know what? It's 50-50 chance, just like everything in life. So I'm either going to live or I'm going to die. It's going to be a good day or a bad day. He's going to like me or he's not. Right. I love that idea. So we kind of took away the fuzzy math and just made everything a 50-50. And I love that idea. It's either going to happen or it's not.
I
And
love it. Fuzzy math. Yes,
yeah, right.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
just it's a great way, especially for somebody who has been through, trauma like that, for her to have hey, it's 50-50 chance of everything. It's either going to happen or it's not. I love that approach.
Because it
Right.
simplifies it and you don't have to use excess energy that you don't have when you're battling cancer, when you're sick, to focus in on what's the possibilities, because your brain and your body use energy for everything. And so the more complicated things are, the more energy it expends, which is less energy to heal you.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I'm really simple-minded, and I was able to do that bike ride because I didn't waste a lot of mental energy on stuff.
Although I would argue that entire bike ride is bilateral processing. And so you're going from one to another, pedaling back and forth. And so you're thinking about a lot.
Oh, dude, that's the reason that I'm really drawn to endurance athletics, is not just to learn about myself and to find out something new. Every time I do it, it really is a place where I contemplate. And I was able to contemplate these stories. The stories are all very, very different. And if look, I don't want to self-aggrandize, but if I'm writing a book that's meant to help people be better equipped to form meaningful relationships, and I'm bringing 15 true life, names are not changed to protect the innocent stories, and I'm getting deep, I got to tell these stories real. Like the reader cannot go like, I literally, I just had, yesterday, I wrote a response. The guy goes, hey, I'm Norwegian. I read your book. I know you had to exaggerate a bit because that's what you do, right? And I go, no, these stories were not exaggerated. They're not at all. Like, they're very, very real. They're unbelievably real. And the fact that they were so harsh and so like poignant that the guy had to write me a note telling me I liked your book, but those stories were exaggerated. I went, wow, I did the right thing, because they're so not exaggerated, right?
Yeah.
And for him to, I hope that he reads that going, oh my God, that's really what people went through. That's really what happened to them. That's really how they dealt with it or didn't deal with things. So that was the whole point. And while I was on the bike ride, I had to really, I was able to let my head go to really deep places on how to contemplate telling these stories the right way. And so yeah, I'm with you. That whole like continuing to move thing does allow your brain a lot of banter as well.
Yeah. I am so excited to read this. It's called Cycle of Lives, right? And you have another book called Winning in the Middle of the Pack.
Yep.
And so you have two books out there. Where can people find you and these books?
Well, books are sold pretty much only on Amazon, but hopefully go support a bookstore. They're in bookstores, big ones and little ones. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever, the hard book, the ebook. Pretty soon, the audio book will be out very shortly. It's already produced. I just got to get it up on the platform. And yeah, they can find out more at cycleoflives.org. Like I mentioned, 100% of the proceeds from this book are going to support the cancer-focused organizations and other charities that were chosen by the book participants. So that's kind of a cool thing. And yeah, they can find out more about what's going on and hire me as a speaker if they want, or just write me a note and tell me if it's helped them or didn't help them, what story they liked, and it's all good.
I love the fact that you have taken some tragedy in your life and just turned it into healing. And this is what this podcast is all about, is how do we take this pain and how do we heal from it and help others heal from it as well? Because there's a lot of us that are currently struggling with these things that would really benefit from this, I think, for sure.
Yeah, well, good. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and keep doing what you're doing. I mean, talking about things like this kind of removes some of the barriers that allows us to deal with it. And I mean, the very, very, very common theme, Haley, with everybody I spoke to along the way, not just the book participants, but everybody that I ran into along the way, is they could identify with that idea of, geez, I don't know how to deal with the emotional side of this. Or if I see somebody going through it, I don't know how to deal with them. It's like, that is such a common theme. And if we can remove some of those barriers, then I think we can form those, more impactful, connections with people around us. And, in my mind, that's really all we're here for.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David.
You're welcome. And thank you, Haley. Keep doing it.